Welcome to the Perspectives Podcast. It's Josue here and Chase as well. And welcome back to the conversation, this great conversation we've been having, and have all these panelists giving their thoughts on just everything going on presently in our cultures. And we thought that it was right. We thought that it was fitting for these last couple of series within the podcast to just honor our guests and give them that opportunity to share their thoughts. And today we had George on. And Chase, what's the recap for this week's episode?
Yeah, definitely excited for y'all to hear this conversation. It was a great one with George. And yeah, we just wanted to create a space for them to be able to just finish up any thoughts that they started over these first three conversations. And so in this one, we really got into, again, just community involvement. George has a big heart for community involvement and how to just pursue unity in relationships in the midst of these tough and seemingly controversial topics. So we hope y'all enjoy, and thanks for tuning in.
Welcome back to the Perspectives Podcast. Josue here. We have Chase, and I want to welcome you guys back to the conversation. We're continuing our conversation that we've been having, this great, phenomenal conversation we've been having around just everything presently going on. And Chase, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good, bro. It's been a few days. I went on my family trip over to Salt Lake in between the last time we recorded. So that was a good trip, but I'm happy to be back. How are you doing, man?
I'm good. Just trying to mess around with this iOS 14, I believe it is. Growing up every year, it gets higher. So we're here. I'm still tech savvy as best as I can. Shout out to YouTube, by the way, for all the videos. But as I mentioned earlier, we have one of our panelists today, because today we want to focus more and just give an opportunity for George as the first one that we bring it on today, just to be able to expound even more on the conversation that we've been having, just to give us some of his thoughts. And, Chase, if there's anything you wanted to add on top of that.
Yeah, I think that we just really wanted to honor each of our guests because we know it's a difficult task to share your perspective and elaborate on the topics that you want to bring up over the course of a couple hours when there's 5 or 6 people, because everyone is wanting to share their thoughts, and we could go off on so many different tangents and kind of get lost in the goal and the hope for the conversation. And I think we really managed the first 3 conversations well in our goal and what we were hoping to do with those. And so from here, being able to just narrow the group down a little bit to be able to just go in more detail, allow these people to speak will be really good. So, George, really appreciate you coming on, man. How you doing?
I'm doing good, man. I appreciate you guys. Thanks for the invite.
For sure. I mean, it's been interesting, having everybody on, like what Chase said, but just getting that opportunity to really just, pick your brain and hear some of your thoughts. And, I think it's going to be very valuable to some people that will probably be curious. Hey, I want to hear more of what this George guy has to say, or I really like his train of thought. I really like where he's going. So I think this would be a great opportunity to be able to hear more. So I just want to ask you right off the bat, how do you think the conversations have been going, the ones we've been having?
I think it's good. It's good that we're having conversations. I think that's something that we need to have as believers trying to navigate through these times that are hard. We just need to get around the dinner table and just have conversations with people that may not agree with how we think, but that is okay, because I think at the end of the day, the goal should be to be motivated by love and ultimately love each other and serve each other well. And so as we navigate through these times, having conversation has to be the first step.
And yeah, even just to that, just thinking about, I know something that you've mentioned that I've taken notice a lot of times, you bring up, the gospel and how we as believers and people have to be gospel centric, right? in terms of being able to process and respond to a lot of these different issues. And so I know a lot of people, even myself, at times when you hear something such as the gospel answers this, what exactly does that mean from a spiritual perspective as well as a practical perspective, right? On the various issues, right? How can people who may hear you, for example, say, the gospel has an answer? What does that look like?
Yeah, for me, I think when we say the gospel is the answer, is the fact that the good news of Jesus Christ has changed our lives, has transformed our hearts. And so because it has transformed our lives, it changes the way we live. And we try to honor him in the way we act, in the way we talk, in the way we talk about people, right? We want to honor and glorify God. And so the gospel is the greatest equalizer, right? If it wasn't for the gospel, I think everybody would just be out for themselves. But the fact that the gospel has changed our lives is giving us something to look forward, right? And that is Jesus coming back and redeeming everything. But until then, we have a purpose here on earth, and we try to steward our resources to try to point to him and to try to get as many people to enjoy of his goodness. And so in this context, what it looks like is building bridges. There's a great divide in our nation, and I don't have to walk too far to see that there's a great divide. I mean, I just have to walk to my mailbox every morning when I'm putting Seeds of Love orders in my mailbox. To the left, there's a Biden sign, and to the right, there's a Trump sign. And so I'm right in the middle, and I think it's a perfect picture of just trying to build a bridge. How can I love my neighbor well, even though they may not agree with everything that I believe? And I think Jesus was a great example of how he lived in such a way that even though he was, misunderstood and not liked by many, he was, if you put things in perspective and you look back at his ministry and his life, many would say he was a good teacher. He was someone that was likable with the things that he stood for, were things that people would agree that are beneficial for our society. And I think when you sum up his teachings, is necessarily just love God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and love your neighbor. And when we do that, God promised us that we will experience the fullness of life. And so it's interesting in the times that we're living in. But the hope that we do have is that we're not alone, and he is in the midst, and he's given us his Holy Spirit to guide us, and so that we can depend on him step by step.
Yeah. I mean, that's a phenomenal question. Even as you were just talking, I think something that stood out to me that I'm pretty sure we got into it the first time we had you on, kind of just learning more about you and just what all that you're involved with. So something that stood out to me is, so when you speak or when you say the gospel, are you referring to the love of Christ that we are supposed to have towards one another? Is that more so what you're referring to in terms of dealing with your neighbor who one maybe on this side of the spectrum and the other is on another side of the spectrum? Is that more so what you're referring to, the love that allows you to navigate between both of those parties or just people?
When I hear the gospel, I think the good news that Jesus Christ resurrected from the death, and because he did resurrect, we have living hope. Right? We don't put our faith in this historic figure, but rather God himself. That one day everything will be restored back to new. And so that is the good news. And so when I hear the gospel, is basically sharing that good news with everyone around me. And because that good news had transformed my life, it changes the way I talk. It changes the way I act. It changes the way I spend my time. It changes the way I swipe my credit card. Right? It changes the way I navigate through hard issues like the ones that we're facing today.
Yeah, I love it. And I just go back to the illustration that you shared. like, I love that you brought up being bridges and being willing to stand in an uncomfortable place between two people who at that time you may or may not totally agree with, but for the sake of unity and for the sake of conversation. Because I definitely think, and I think we've talked about this previously in the podcast, but I think us as Americans, we tend to overvalue comfort a lot to the point where we're not willing to put our pride or our lifestyle on the line to be able to have the society as a whole benefit, and to be able to love like our neighbors and be there. And as well, like if there's any group or individuals in the world who should be able to have that mix of boldness and tolerance for like both sides of that, that conversation, it should be us. It should be those of us who are filled with the Spirit, to be able to have that self-control, to be able to have that patience to sit there with them and be able to just talk through these things. And I definitely love, I mean, I think everyone knows, Josue and I think I speak for you as well, George, is like, we just love conversation. And that's how we're able to break down. That's one of the tools that God's given us to really break down and think about different issues and think about things and be able to come together and be able to just move forward. And so like, I just absolutely love that analogy. And yeah, I'll just say I definitely love your answer to just a question, because yeah, I definitely feel, I think all of us at times feel that either people can be like too spiritual in this conversation or be too practical and almost forget Jesus's role in this conversation. Because for example, I think someone who caught a lot of flack with what he said, I can't remember how long ago this was, but whenever like John MacArthur, for instance, was just saying, oh, we just need to preach the gospel and things like that. Like that was something where he caught a lot of flack for. And I wish he would have been able to articulate more on that, because yeah, like whenever we say, the answer is preaching the gospel, the answer is, sharing the gospel so that hearts can be transformed. There's also the practical and action component of that, of following the commandments and not just sitting there in what we normally think in English language is preaching, for instance.
No, that's good. I would add to that, not necessarily just the solution is the gospel, but the solution is also us living out the gospel. I think what I see a lot of people doing now is just expressing their opinion, right, for the sake of just being right. And I don't think that is God's heart at all. He would tell many, instead of going and worshiping him, to take back their sacrifice and get right with those around them. We need to figure out how to live in community with people that we're in conflict with, how to solve conflict well. Because I think that how we deal with conflict, it definitely shows who we worship. And so we have to be better at that.
Yeah. And I think like conflict is inevitable as well. Like it's something that living in the world that we're in right now, I mean, it's said all the time where it's almost cliche now, but I mean, Jesus never promised this life would be perfect. Like after we followed him, nor did he say that, the church life, would be perfect. That's his hope for us, is to be able to live together in love and unity, being filled by the Spirit. But it's potentially not something to have that proper. It's not proper to maybe have that expectation that, oh, we're going to be able to live together all great and all perfect and everything like that. And so we should be able to understand and build the skills for, discussing and having conversations and conflict resolution and everything like that. And I think we could see that embodied not just in regular interpersonal relationships, but I mean, marriage as well. And I think it's something that's so key that, again, kind of going back to it with us as Americans, and I don't know if other cultures prioritize it and idolize it in a way as much as we do, maybe, but just with the way that we value comfort like so much, it just gets in the way of that. And like I'll say for me, like I'll be honest, like I'm a pretty conflict averse person to where I don't really like to have tense conversations or anything like that. I haven't really been in a fight, I think, ever since like third grade or something like that. But it's something that through courage and through boldness, we need to be willing to, like articulate whenever, we don't necessarily agree with something. So then from there, we're able to just talk about it. We're able to converse rather than building up this resentment in our heart towards that person and just thinking, oh, this person just doesn't know what they're talking about. Gosh, only if I could share this one fact with them, we'd be all good. And it's just not the case.
Yeah, I mean, even just to that point, I wanted you, George, if you can enlighten us even more to your conflict point, because I'll get on, for example, social media, because I feel like that's where a lot of what we see as, talks and conversations come from. We see, believers on two sides of the spectrum when it comes to a lot of these different things. And similar to what Chase was saying, and it's to the point where not only do we disagree, but we're now in conflict with one another, right? So how do we, I guess maybe even how do we go about having those conversations like you talk about a lot, being at that same table? How do we have those kinds of conversations and, so at the end of the day, not be in conflict with one another, because we're not called to be in conflict with one another. We can disagree, but I feel like conflict brings it to another level.
Yeah, I think you guys know me, and I'm big on community, right? Every single night, if you're hanging out with me, if you're just following me, we're probably going to be hanging out with the group of people that I constantly meet with. Tonight after this, I'm actually meeting up with a couple guys that we meet every Monday, and then after that, because our Wednesday group got pushed to Monday, so I'll be meeting with another group of guys after that. And it just starts with a conversation, with us being honest, like, hey, how's your week? And for me, I would say that what's happening in our nation is heavy on me, because part of my heart breaks. It's broken because I see a lot of division within the church, right? And how do we preserve the unity within the body? And then another part of my heart is also broken because, we're losing our witness. And so how do we reach the non-believer in the midst of this division, right? And so we have to be transparent and honest and create spaces like the one that we're creating right now, where we can just simply have conversations. Conversations where, we share, we open the Bible, we ask the Holy Spirit to intervene. Conversations not looking to be right, not with an agenda. Because oftentimes we get in a room or across the table with someone, and they're more concerned about telling us why we should vote this way rather than just simply building a relationship. Right? I'm not married, but I know a lot of married folks, and it doesn't go well whenever you tell your wife, why she's wrong, right? No one wants to be friends with someone who knows it all, right? And Jesus is clear that we should be people that are humble, are seeking to understand, quick to listen. And that's how we build relationships, because ultimately the goal is the Great Commission, right? To make disciples of all nations. And I truly believe that the biggest currency is relationships. Like, how are we doing in our relationships? And if we're not dealing with conflict well, it's most likely that our relationships are shallow, right? There's no depth to them. And so I would just challenge everyone, how are we doing? And going deep, and calling people to God's best, admonishing one another when we are too comfortable, or when have idols in our lives, when we're putting things above God, when we're speaking about people behind their backs. little things like this create a culture that I think is attractive to the non-believer, because even as we navigate through COVID, a lot of people are isolated, and people are looking to be in community with people where they can be transparent and honest. And, I'm meeting with people that, dealing with depression, suicide thoughts. I mean, there's real struggles out there. And I think sometimes we're so fixated and so focused on our issues that we neglect looking outside our bubble, looking to the right and to looking at our left, and just being a helping hand to the hurting people out there. And so it first is truly understanding our purpose, and that is to build relationships with people. And we do that with humility and love, and with no expectation, going into a conversation, trying to seek to understand. And I think if you're in a group where everyone agrees with what you believe, I would challenge you that you might be too comfortable, and it's maybe time to find some other friends where you can, branch out and try to diverse your thinking. But I think we all have room for growth. I would be lying if I said I have it all together. I'm 28 years old, and every day I'm learning. But man, to wake up and ask God to help us navigate through these times is the first thing that we need to do every single day. And I think there's so many people that God is gonna place in our lives, and if our only motivation is to love, we'll find out that there's so much to life than being right.
Yeah, and I love it, and I think that kind of goes towards something that, a topic that we'll talk about here in a little bit of not being right. It isn't always like the most important thing, and I'll say that's like a tough thing for me to admit, because like that's something that like in being vulnerable, that I think I've been leaning a lot towards, like in this conversation, is like, and I think y'all have seen it in the conversations we've had before the podcast and before the panel started. It was like so much. I was just like, I just want to get things right. Like, I just want to sit down with a group of people who I know are just devoted to Jesus and just like figure this out and get it right. And I don't know if now, after 2.5 months, after we had the first conversation, like if that is the proper goal that we should have. Cause I think what we're going to talk about, here in a little bit, is like having that balance of, grace and truth, and being able to find that. But yeah, I just love it. I think, like being able to approach conversations with humility and being willing to, I think a practical thing that we could do in trying to show humility in conversations is, instead of us going into the conversation with the intention of wanting to get our point across, or from a practical standpoint, whenever you're in a conversation about like a controversial topic, like you not being the first one to share your thoughts about a topic, especially whenever you're the one who's bringing it up. One way to show humility in it is just to ask a person like, hey, like, what do you think about this? Because I think, one, from like a psychological sense, it just kind of opens you up to hearing other thoughts if you're genuine in that. And as well, like, I think it shuts you off in a good way to just wanting to get your point across, rather than wanting to actually hear people as well and just wanting to have that conversation.
That's good. And I would just want to encourage you guys. Because at the end of the day, we both are, I'm friends with both of you guys. And I think we've created a space where we can be honest. I mean, we've been honest in the past, Chase. I mean, I don't feel like I can't tell you anything, right? Because at the end of the day, you know my intention behind what I'm saying. I know your intention. And at the end of the day, it's about glorifying God. And that's what I mean by creating spaces where we can just be transparent. And we're going to fail because we're human. But at the end of the day, the agenda has to be glorifying God, not trying to do things out of selfish ambition or just for the sake of being right.
Yeah, I love it. And so kind of to go to the next thing that we wanted you to add on that is just kind of going off of past conversations that I think all three of us here are really intentional about, both when we're having conversations about topics and then just in personal life is you said a number of times, in the conversations that being involved in local community and your local community, your city, and pastors seeing these topics, seeing these issues through the lens of their local context is such a key thing. And me and Josue definitely both agree with that. And so we just want to give you the opportunity to share a little bit more on that in terms of either why you think that's something that's important to tie this conversation on a somewhat generalized scale with being involved in your local community, and then any tips that you would share that y'all have done through Become Network or your church or anything like that.
Yeah, so the model that we've implemented is discipleship in community. And we know that it's beneficial when we come together and we serve our community for three simple reasons. The first one being that we're looking outside our bubble, right? We're looking out to our cities and asking ourselves, what are the needs in our cities? And so these are common grounds that we're coming together, right, to try to resolve and serve. And when we do it together, what happens is that we also build memories, right? We build memories together. And so, I mean, we've all served together. We all have things that we've done together. And even if you look back at some of your best friends, right, you can recall when you went on that trip. You can recall when you attended their wedding and stuff like that. And so it's different when you build that relationship, and it's beautiful when it happens through service, because now you're doing it sacrificially, right? It's not about us. It's about God and how He can use us. And when we're serving together, we're fulfilling our purpose. And I think that we're also making God smile, because the fact that we're living in unity. And I think that's God's heart, that His church would be united so that they would know that we're His disciples. Something that I would challenge people during this political season. Ask yourself, how many people from the opposing party are my friends, right? And so if you're a Republican, reaching out to a Democrat, and instead of criticizing or judging or bullying their belief system, simply ask them, hey, how can we serve our city? I know that you are a Jesus follower. How can we find common ground and serve together, right? With the only agenda being that we want to reflect God's sacrificial love and grace to those around us. And I think when we focus on that, I think we'll be surprised in the things that we learn from each other. Rather than fearing from afar, we'll truly get to know someone and their story, and maybe gain some perspective in the process.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, you're saying that it's possible to be on both sides of the spectrum, but still get along and serve together as believers and all that. I just want to make sure for everybody listening, I just want to make sure that is exactly what you're saying.
That's exactly what I'm saying. I think if we look at the teachings of Jesus, I think that is His heart. I think God is more concerned about us pursuing unity than us packing a building and worshiping Him. When we're in conflict and we're being divisive on social media and every single outlet that we can think of, right? God cares about unity, and it starts with us getting uncomfortable. But in us getting uncomfortable, I truly believe that God will step in, and He's going to honor our faithfulness by just empowering us and healing us. healing us from anything that we may done wrong, and simply thinking that we have it all together and we know it all. And the human experience is a beautiful thing, and I think we are robbing ourselves by putting our preferences above what God's purpose is.
And I think about, for example, I believe it's in First Corinthians. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's in First Corinthians where, Paul is speaking. He's writing to the Corinthian church, and he mentions how some people are saying they follow Apollos, some people say they follow Paul, and Paul's like, "Yo, I didn't die for you guys." Right? Making Christ the main person, the main thing that we should all, put our focus on. And from there, we're able to build, right? And so even just thinking about that, and to the question that Chase brought up about being able to serve, I was thinking about how, in the writing, in Paul's writing, to the Corinthians, he's addressing one thing. To the Ephesian church, he's addressing another thing. To the Galatian church, he's addressing another thing. And these are all regions where believers were. And so I think about it from, for us, being here in Texas, I even just think about, you might write something different to the church here in Southlake in an aspect of how you serve your community and what that looks like in terms of dealing with another community, I don't know, some other place, Burleson or somewhere else, right? First place that came to mind. So I think there's something about, to Chase's point, we have to be specific with the community where God has placed us. And so if you can kind of speak to that a little bit more.
Yeah, I think it's huge. I think it starts in your community, because we know our community better than anybody else, right? And what happens is when we start going into communities without partnering with that community, we start telling them what they need rather than what they actually need. And so I'm not a fan of going to South Dallas without me building a relationship with people in South Dallas and asking them, hey guys, what do you guys need? Rather than me telling them what they need. Because we don't know that community, and maybe what we think they need, it might not necessarily be helping them. There's a book that has been super helpful to me, and it's When Helping Hurts. Right? And understanding that sometimes we think that the best thing is giving someone $100. But if they're dealing with an addiction, that might not be the wisest thing to do. Right? And so we have to start in our communities because we understand our community the best. And when we do branch out of an overflow, what's happening where God has placed us, it starts with collaboration. And so I know you guys love collaborating, and God's about collaboration. And so when we go into different areas, I know you guys do work all over the world, and partnering with the local church there, and ministries are involved, and just coming alongside and being a resource to them.
Yeah, and I love you alluding to it. And yeah, I think we've talked about it on the podcast a little bit before. I know that we've talked about it with you a lot, but yeah, man, we definitely see God's heart for unity move so much through partnerships and through building relational equity in the area that you want to help out with, or with the people you want to help out with, whether that's near or far. But yeah, definitely, I don't think I can say I agree. I don't think I can say enough how much I agree with you with saying, you need to go in there with humility and asking, hey, what do you need? Instead of telling, hey, this is what you need. Because there's so many things to take into consideration. Internationally, you need to take cultural context into consideration, how they've built their lifestyles. But even now, in domestic work things, that are close to where you're living, situations like what you said about addiction can happen all the time, unfortunately. And if we're just going in there to set up a pop-up tent for one day a month and just hop right out of there, we don't really know if what we're doing is actually being effective or sustainable or anything like that. And so being continually involved there, or working with someone who is continually involved there, is such a good thing. And I wish, and this, y'all can Y'all can say y'all disagree with me if you want. I'm perfectly fine with that. Because it's just going, I think, a step further to like your point, George, just about wondering how many problems could be solved through local involvement and local service. Is like, I kind of wish in order to vote that we required everyone who's registering to have like 1 or 2 hours of community service every 4 years, because I definitely don't even think that amount is being reached on average by our population in this country. And so like, I would just want to see the impact that could have of people actually going out there to serve and placing that as our top priority rather than other things, and just like how many problems wouldn't be there if we did that. And so I don't know if y'all want to add on that.
I'll take it a step further. How about we are required to serve, and then these candidates actually have to lead the service project?
Down with that. I love that.
But another step further, when he said we have to get to know their needs, I'll just take it a step further where we all have different love languages, right? And so, man, I was hanging out with my girlfriend this weekend, and for me, my love language is quality time, right? And so if I'm in the same room, it's like, hey, I'm spending time with you, right? But that's not necessarily the most loving thing if I'm on my phone, right? And so learning the way someone is loved is huge as well, because we have so many blind spots, and we can easily think, oh man, I'm being so loving because I'm spending time with them. But maybe what you're doing maybe not be loving to them, right? And so you have to ask questions, get to know people, so that way we can love well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you brought up the love, because I feel like it really goes into the next question very well. And so we want to hear your thoughts. I'm going to ask all these questions. I think there's 3 different ones, but then I'll repeat it so you can kind of, answer one at a time. So how do you love people when they have the wrong, or you could say false, worldview or false understanding of truth or reality, right? So how do you love somebody who has a wrong, false worldview or false understanding of truth, reality, right? How do you love somebody who believes the earth is flat? I don't know. Maybe some people that listen to us believe that, and that's okay. How do you love somebody like that, right? Just an example. I get, maybe let's just do that, and then we'll go to the next question. That way, you don't have to think about all these different things.
Yeah, I would start out by saying that you have to see people for who they are, and that is that they are loved by God. And I think when God sees people, he sees souls. He doesn't see necessarily personalities or, our past. He sees a soul, and he cares for that soul. And so when we see a soul, and the fact that God has a plan and purpose for their lives, just as he has a plan and purpose for our lives, it changes the way we see people, right? That coworker that irritates us on Monday morning is no longer just, that person, right? He's someone that was created in God's image and God cares for. And so because I know that truth, I should be concerned about his eternal zip code, right? And so I'm going to try to leverage everything that I have to try to reflect God's goodness, because at the end of the day, he's either going to go 1 or 2 places. One, he's going to end up living in the presence of God, or he's going to live separation from God forever. And so we want everybody to experience the fullness of life here on earth. And when it's all said and done, we want them to go to heaven. And so if we truly believe that the gospel is the good news, we will do everything that's in our hands to invite people to the greatest party. I'll share a story from an atheist who was a magician, and he received those little Old Testament Bibles, and someone came out. He was a Christian. He was at a show, and he went up to him and gave him those New Testament Bibles. And he went on his YouTube channel later, just sharing his experience, how a fan had come up to him to give him a Bible. And he's known for being an atheist. And so I think this Christian saw this as an opportunity for him to share the gospel with him. And he was sharing in the video, just saying the fact that he does not believe in God, and his belief system has not changed. He hasn't read the Bible that he was gifted, but he started thinking, he started reflecting, and he started just saying to himself, if you believe that one day you'll be in the presence of God and he's going to ask you, why should I let you in? And you believe that the gospel is the solution, how much do you have to hate someone not to share with them? You know, it's like if they were stuck in a railroad and you knew the train was coming, how much do you have to hate them to just watch them die? Right? And so that convicted me, right? Because are we eager for those to know the good news? Or are we just so consumed with ourselves and our opinion and just not looking for opportunities to share? Because there's so many opportunities, but sometimes we miss the opportunity because maybe we're so comfortable or we're not asking him to eliminate our vision.
Yeah, I love that. And yeah, I think that goes exactly kind of towards what a couple of things that we've mentioned previously in this conversation is boldness and having that unconditional love, and not just sitting there in apathy whenever that conversation or that person's life doesn't affect your own life. Because I definitely think that's something that a lot of people and a lot of Christians can fall prey to, is just kind of being apathetic about different things. If they're able to just kind of chill, and if they have enough money, and if they think that they're comfortable, there goes that word again, they can just kind of sit there. And so I definitely love that, because that guy could have just sat there comfortably watching a magic show, but he didn't. He cared enough and was inspired by the Spirit enough and was obedient to the Spirit enough to do that. And so kind of the second part of that question that we wanted to ask was, whenever you're in those conversations with people who you think has a wrong understanding on something, or so just something along those lines, what are some boundaries that you set for yourself or for your actions or for your words, in those types of conversations? And what are some things that you want to have self-control around? Because kind of the reason why we're bringing this up is because we've definitely, I think, seen in, this racism conversation and the policing conversation, the cultural conversation that's been going on, people can be too much on the side of the spectrum of either one side being way too empathetic and not just validating the person's feelings and loving them through that, but also just saying, oh yeah, you're correct in everything that you're saying, and never just kind of helping them through that to discover truth. But then as well, on the other side, you see people just purely just giving what they deem as correction and things like that, and never validating pain or feelings or anything like that and being empathetic. And so I think we can all agree that being on both sides, either side, either extreme of that spectrum, potentially isn't good. And so kind of just what are your thoughts on that question?
Yeah, I think the first thing I would do when entering conversation is praying that God would intervene, he would be in the midst. Because at the end of the day, if we're let alone to our own words, they're probably not going to transform or change anybody's mind, right? And so if the goal is to glorify God, we have to invite him into the conversation. We have to humble ourselves and ask him, hey, I'm about to sit down with someone who may disagree with me in everything, but help me, Lord, to love this person well, and help me to navigate this conversation in a way that would ultimately point back to you. And so if we go into the conversation with that humility and that posture, it takes the focus off of us, and it allows God to use us. He starts putting the words in our mouth. I would also add that we have to have a goal in mind. Oftentimes we go into conversations without a goal, right? What is the goal of this conversation? Is it to try to convince someone that our political views are the best? Or is it to try to grow spiritually, right? Because that changes things, right? That changes the way the vocabulary that we use, right? If we're getting angry about things, that may be a sign that maybe there is immaturity there, right? Or maybe we're not respecting the person across the table, right? And so there has to be a goal in mind, so that way we know where to start and where to end, and the Holy Spirit helps us navigate through that.
I think that's perfect. Josue, you have anything you want to add to that question, or any tangents you want to ask?
Yeah, I do. I had to find this verse real quick. So if you want to ask your question, then I'll hop on.
No, I mean, I'll just add a comment, because yeah, George, I definitely love everything that you had to say there. I love that, and I think that's, like, you saying that, I think is a lesson for, I guess Josue and I think both, just for the podcast, and then for, I think, just kind of life in general, because I think maybe one of the things that, like, I've been sometimes diving in too much in terms of conversations at times is kind of just going into it without a goal and just being like, all right, God, just do whatever you want to do, and things like that. And I think there can be beauty in that, but that it's not good to always just have, like, no order or anything like that, and no goal that you're wanting to get towards. And so I love that, because I think, like, for example, like, one guy, like, he's not a Christian, but I think he's a very good curator of conversations, is Joe Rogan. And with him, it seems like his conversations just kind of go all over the place. And I don't know if he's ever had a conversation or recorded a conversation with someone else about, like, how he curates his conversations, but it seems like there's not really a plan there, and they just kind of go wherever and go chase these tangents and things like that. And there's beauty behind that, but probably as I think about it more, like, I bet you he does have some sort of rough rundown that he wants to go through, or an end goal to the conversation for what he wants his guests to open up to and things like that. And so, like, I definitely love just that point.
Yeah, and the verse I was trying to find is in the 1 Corinthians chapter 3. I'm going to read it real quick. And it says, I, brethren, could not speak to you as spiritual people, but as to carnal, as to babes in Christ. I fed you with milk and not with solid food, for until now you were not able to receive it, and even now you are still not able, for you are still carnal. For where there are envy, strife, and divisions among you, are you not carnal and behaving like mere men? For one says, I am of Paul, and another, I am of Apollos. Are you not carnal? And so I think that kind of really just goes even to the point about the divisions that I was thinking about earlier, and how we as people, when there's envy and strife, and especially among believers, God's like, what are you guys doing? Right? There's supposed to be unity, like we've emphasized so many different times, but when it comes to certain topics, it seems like a lot of times we can't seem to get on the same page on these topics. I'm not sure if it's because they're just things made from man concepts. That's maybe why we can't seem to agree on these things. If it's a sign of just the fall or whatever it might be. But yeah, it seems like, especially in light of just the conversation we've been having, there are certain things where even as believers, we're so divided on, we're so just separated on, to the point that Chase was making. You might have too much sympathy, or you might just have too much correction, right? We oftentimes kind of find ourselves on those sides of the spectrum. And so, I mean, that was just my last comment. I don't know if you had anything along those lines. I mean, it'll probably just be you reiterating a lot of the things you've already said, but I don't know if you had any thoughts along just that verse, in division and strife and all that.
Something that I would encourage anybody listening is that not having the same expectations for everyone, right? There's different types of relationships. And you even see this in Jesus in his life, where he would always talk to the masses, but then he would have his 12 disciples. And he would even go further where he had his 3 best friends. Right? We talk about that community and how he had his intimate friends. And these were all different relationships. And so that's even interesting to think about, how even Jesus had different relationships with different people, right? He wouldn't have he didn't have the same relationship as one of his best friends, compared to one where he stood in front of mass. And so not having that expectation when we try to judge these relationships, some relationships is simply to try to share the gospel, right? And love them. They don't have to agree, even believe the same things that we do to build a relationship with them. Sometimes we're just trying to convince them that God is who he is. And in the process, maybe one day we can become best friends.
Yeah, I love that, man. And yeah, I think that kind of brings us back to more in-depth version of kind of that roles conversation that we had in part 2 of the panel conversation, just about the role of different people and the expectations to have for different people. And it's kind of cliche at this point, but yeah, that like unity doesn't mean uniformity and things like that. And that, yeah, like there is a reason that like the thought that I brought up of, empathy and correction, that, that is a spectrum, and people can be filled by the Spirit to be on different various spots on that spectrum. And that could be good, depending on, how to, I don't know if appeal to the person is a proper word, but just to be able to love them and meet them where they are and call them to better. And so we definitely love that, man. And so kind of to give you an opportunity to share some last things, on this conversation that, us and the group have kind of gone on over the last few months. We just want to give you opportunity to share any resources, any teachers, anything like that God has really been feeding you through over these last 2 or 3 months, and that you think are just really well, just have a really good foundation in the Word and just everything like that.
One resource that I can think of is the Bible Project. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. They do a great job of taking these complex themes and passages, and they use animation to explain books of the Bible and themes of the Bible. And they're very, very interactive. They're fun to watch. And I think it's a very quick way to just gain so much wisdom and how to read the Bible. And what I love about it is they also tie in the overall narrative of the Bible, pointing back to Jesus and how he has just orchestrated just how even the Bible has been written, and pointing how we can see Jesus in every single passage. And so the Bible Project is one that I've been watching from afar. And then also Right Now Media. A lot of churches have a subscription to Right Now Media, and you can go on the website and get one. And they have this huge library of very diverse content. And so you can find people like Tony Evans, JP, you name it. There's a ton of theologians who have just poured in content to this library, and they'll go through Bible studies, and they'll have Bible studies where like the background is Israel. They're like literally like reading the Bible as they're like walking in Israel. So it's super cool. Just like high production. But and I guess the last one would be if you want to give someone and share the gospel with someone, hey, grab a Season Love bracelet, go on the website, you can send it to a friend. And so cool way to share the gospel with someone and also make a difference in the process.
Yeah, so good. Love that shout out. Josue, you got anything to add, man?
No, similar to that. Sorry. I've been listening to Tony Evans. He's doing a series right now on what is it called? Kingdom voting, and how we as believers can approach, voting, from kingdom mindset, right? And so for me, that's been very informative. So he's in part 5 right now. I believe he just did it. It's all on YouTube. He covers family, government, and all these different things. So I just wanted to add that on there as well. I have actually never heard of this. Right Now Media? Is that what you said?
Yeah, Right Now Media, man. It's basically like Netflix. Okay. But man, it's all Christian content. Super cool. Super cool. Yeah, but definitely check it out. Yeah, I love Tony Evans, man. I think whenever there's something racial or, I love his perspective on things. He's so wise. And I try to keep my library very diverse just because, I think there's so many perspectives to all these issues. And I think there's wisdom in the counsel of many.
Yeah.
Love that. Thanks for sharing that, man. Definitely appreciate it. And yeah, man, I just want to say again, just thank you so much. Kind of stealing your analogy from the start. Thank you so much for just coming to like sit at the table, being able to just be here. And even if it's over Zoom, it's still been good. I think we've all gotten used to Zoom in a way over the last 6 months. And so, yeah, man, definitely just appreciate you being willing to invest the time to be able to come together as, friends here in the DFW area who've known each other for anywhere from a year to a number of years now. Just coming together to discuss and be vulnerable, be humble, be willing to just gain perspective on things. And so, yeah, man, we're definitely grateful for you for that.
Dude, thank you so much for having me. I love you guys. And, if anything, you guys have my phone number. You can reach out. Much love.
Yeah, dude, we'll definitely have you on the podcast here soon. And yeah, man, definitely just blessings to you. May his presence just be with you. And we definitely just love you, man.
Nice. Much love.
What's up, y'all? Thanks so much for tuning into this episode. We really do hope that releasing these conversations is helpful for y'all and just your processing of just everything that's going on. All the information for Perspectives is included in the description below if you'd like to support us and the work that we're doing in the podcast. If you liked today's episode, please subscribe and just leave us a review. And so until next time, much love and God bless.